Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon International. We're going to be starting our final day of our final cup in the East. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jack, and joining me for all the action, we've got Zyronic, Nagura, and Tettles. My friends, our work colleagues in the back, he's just kind of enjoying himself. He's taking a little bit of a breather onto that one. But it's our final day of the Eastern Cup and final day of our regular summer season before BlizzCon. We'll be seeing the best the East has to offer on display. And in many cases, we've talked about it previously. A lot of times, this tournament this weekend is going to be a lot of times for bragging rights. We already know which teams are going to be going to BlizzCon, and as we take a look at our bracket to start off our day here, we'll be able to see King of Ruins matching up against Big Money Crab to see who will be able to face Old and Scuffed a little bit later on. And then in that upper finals, Buff4 Nerf Rogue has been dominating the tournament lately, and will be facing up against Black Mamba. And as we mentioned previously, Black Mamba's had their struggles against a number of their opponents. So as we take into our schedule as well, the action that we have coming up, Big Money Crab, we've seen a little bit of variety out of them, in particular, Zyronic, where we knew them previously from Season 1. We loved being able to start seeing them and love that logo as well. But in particular is like how they're matching up against their opponent in King of Ruins. King of Ruins really struggled in King's Rest, especially against their opponents early on. I believe it was between Buff4 and Nerf Rogue.
Yeah, well, when we talk about Big Money Crab, I just want to see more Warlock from them.
Yeah.
That's all I care about. I want to see more Warlock play. I want to see them flesh that out a little bit. Yeah, King of Ruins, they left a lot to be desired, and I don't really think... it's hard to pick a favorite in here. I think Big Money Crab played pretty well against Black Mamba. Like, they could have beaten Black Mamba in that series, and they could be in the winners finals right now, so... I think Big Money Crab is a slight favorite to take this series. It's
I think
really
so.
hard to say.
Well, I mean, you mentioned it previously with the Warlock play and how it was very cool to see, but there was also a lot of struggles that they had in terms of setting themselves up for some of these larger pulls. And when we look at Freehold in particular, how do you think Zyronic the Warlock's going to match up with that and bolstering?
Terribly.
Yeah?
Warlock's damage management is also RNG. They just have passive AoE cleave. Like, they can do some like single target chaos bolts, but that's kind of it. You don't really have that great of bolstering management. On top of that, you can maybe cleave down 2 mobs, so they're going to be good on Council of Captains, but that's about it. They don't have very good damage control overall, so I just don't like the pick in general in Freehold.
I wonder if Niles can play Moonkin, because that's what Supreme played in Freehold last time around.
I like this idea. Hold on.
all the caster players, I mean, not only are casters, but they're also casters in game, and they love to see their classes represented, as I'm sure you guys do too at home. Let's see what these teams got as we start up game number 1 in Freehold.
Well, Niles is not disappointing as he's bringing the Warlock here in Freehold as well. Now, maybe he can prove Sarah wrong, maybe he can do something great with his Warlock here in Freehold, but the problem is bolstering, right? And you mentioned that it can't really control your damage as well as some other classes might.
I mean, make me a believer, Niles. Warlock can do a lot of damage with the cooldowns. You see he's keeping up with the Outlaw Rogue. This is where, like, an Infernal with all of your cooldowns with Bloodlust, this is exactly what you can see from Warlock. They can do more than an Outlaw Rogue, because they have a lot of damage potential on, 10-plus targets. But to be honest with you, a lot of AoE classes have a lot of potential on 10-plus targets, so it's not really that impressive to say. But the second this cooldown runs out, which is going to be right about now, at 30 seconds is how long his cooldowns last, his damage is going to plateau, whereas the Rogue can keep Blade Flurrying because their charges...
It's actually an assassination Rogue here for Big Money Crab side, interestingly enough, because I think I think they were playing Outlaw most of the time, and now they're switching to Asa, but unfortunately they're having a lot of problems here at the very end, and you can see them also just being bolstered so much. You see this one Enforcer here being really huge. I'm not sure how many bolstering stacks there are this important, but there's definitely a lot. And you can see how they're struggling. Tagorian is just trying to run away. You can't really tank those mobs anymore. You see one hit, just bring him so low and he goes down again. I'm not really sure if they should just reset this whole pool at this point, because this mob has a lot of HP.
Not only is the Enforcer running around meleeing people for all their HP, this crack shot is sitting in the corner shooting people. Let's see how much that shoot hits. Okay, never mind, we didn't get to see it because he got meleeed to the face for his entire health bar. They dealt with almost all the trash, but this is something we saw from Big Money Crab yesterday, where they went for these sort of push-style strategies. They didn't go for MDI-style pulls like we saw from King of Ruins, where they did what we typically see. They stealth through all of the trash, and now we see Big Money Crab doing it, unfortunately, after their full wipe with some trickle deaths. But yeah, King of Ruins, it looked like in their matches yesterday, they were at least going for MDI-style strategies, where they would use their shrouds in places we normally see Shroud use. They do similar style trash pulls, albeit usually pretty small. And you can see that here, they've only got 7% trash, whereas, normally MDI teams or higher-end Western teams will pull something like 20% trash before they pull the first boss. But they're going for a more efficient strategy, because once you get this first boss down, you get a checkpoint and you can move on to the rest of the dungeon.
Yeah, I definitely like what King of Ruins is doing here, at least. They're already fighting Sky Captain Crag now. We talked about this boss quite a lot, just because it tends to be very difficult if you're running full melee groups. As you can see, both Gogo and LS getting hit by the shot here, and Greeno unfortunately getting hit by the bird, dropping very low, proccing his staff as well as his unrelating tide. So lots of problems here for King of Ruins, but if he manages to heal up the rogues, he himself should not be in trouble as long as he dodges any further birds, as they can easily be sidestepped, and he's outranging the powder shot because I believe it's 30 yards range of powder shot. So for a healer, you can just stand out there, bait the pulls, hopefully you get all the pulls there, not in melee, because if you get the pulls on melee, the initial damage from it spawning on top of you does a little bit of damage, and then on top of that, the powder shot, if you have unlucky timing, it can just one-shot you.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, you see Gogo get cheat. Exactly what you mentioned happened here to Gogo. They got the bat guano, or the bird guano, I don't know what it's called, on top of the group. They took the initial damage, and then he got powder shotted. That's his cheat death gone, and they also got hit by a charge as the boss went down. Fortunately, we've seen some resets there where if the tank gets knocked outside the arena, the boss just instantly resets and there's nothing you can do about it. So luckily for them, the boss went down right before they all got hit by that bird. Otherwise, we could have just seen a full reset, which, it's fortified, but still having to do an entire boss all over again because of a small mess up like that is not what you want to see.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to mention about racials, right? All of them are playing Night Elf, so all of them have Shadow Melt, and there's some skips that you want to do, like for example skipping this Enforcer that King of Ruins just did. I was thinking about Niles for Big Money Crab because he can't be a Night Elf, but they have the Gateway to skip, right? You can do some interesting Gateway skips, not only to skip this Enforcer, but also later on before Harlan Suite, where you can skip up, I believe. At least it used to work, so that's something they can do. It's a pretty neat little trick, and it's nice utility to have out of the Warlock here. As King of Ruins is already moving on to the next trash pack, skipped quite a bit here. They're in front of the second boss, just doing small trash packs. Again, they're not going very big, but it's also something that you don't necessarily have to do in a bolstering environment, because sometimes even if you pull, let's say you pull 10 mobs, the amount of time that you gain by doing one pull instead of two might not be worth it if you bolster the mobs too much at the very end, and then you lose time having to deal with the extra HP from bolstering.
Unfortunately, the exact same thing just happened for Big Money Crab. We saw that same combo come down and almost one-shot two of the players. Jet dropped incredibly low. We even see Concrete dropping low to that shot from Sky Captain Crag. But yeah, one death coming out for them because of that combination, the bird guano plus the powder shot, just instantly one-shotting almost two players. Fortunately, they were able to heal Jet up, but Froggy goes down as well. So another death on the side of Big Money Crab. It's just kind of a dangerous boss in general. And I think if we saw this as a tyrannical instance, there'd be some deaths for sure in here, but I think they'd have to play a lot more defensive. It'd be really interesting to see how teams would live through that. Fortunately for them, fortified, so it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, it makes sense to see that comp coming out, because you kind of have to have a ranged DPS player if you're running Holy Paladin. I mean, we've even seen from teams like Niles is going to have to go down here, unfortunately, because he doesn't have Shadow Meld, like you mentioned. They couldn't get the Gateway off because of the Void Emissary there.
He unfortunately, okay, so what they wanted to do was Jet was jumping down, getting aggro from an Enforcer, pull it away, and then the rest of the team wanted to like walk through. But Niles jumped too early, I believe, so he got in combat with the Enforcer, and then he had to die as well. Now, I think Concrete is also in combat with the Void Emissary, so I'm not sure if that's going to cause any problems, because at least he got hit by the AoE from the Void Emissary, so we'll see if that will cause any further problems here for this team. But one more thing I wanted to note about the first boss is that Concrete actually managed to stand in melee and do damage. He did 25k single target DPS as a healer, and the only reason why he was able to do that was because Niles is there as a range, and he was baiting the pools for them, right? If there was a full melee comp, then Concrete was the one who would have been standing outside and wasn't able to do any sort of damage. So good on them to make use of that just range DPS, being able to have the healer there doing some extra DPS to kill the boss faster. Now, King of Ruins, they're already moving on to the Ring of Booty, actually, pulling some of the Demolishers here, which, again, interesting. Something we don't really see that often, as Crushers, sorry. You don't really see Crushers being pulled that often because it's bolstering, right? So I wonder if they just do it because they have a lot of single target focus DPS to get some extra percentage.
Yeah, I'm not too sure as well. You know, that the Sky Captain Crab thing we were talking about, I mean, we've even seen that problem for teams even like Method and A when JB was running Mistweaver in this dungeon. He had to stand out of melee because you're not going to swap spots for one of your rogues or your monk. That'd be ridiculous. Or your unholy DK. That'd be ridiculous. So yeah, you're just forced to do 0 DPS. But I mean, it's also a thing for Resto Druids as well. They can't go into cat form and get into melee to DPS either. So I mean, we even saw from Supreme yesterday on the Boomkin, he was doing it for buff 4 nerf rogue as well. So yeah, I think ranged is definitely an interesting choice in Freehold just for the extra healer DPS. I don't know if it's enough to make up for time for the entire dungeon, because I don't think there's really any ranged DPS right now that bring the same amount of damage and utility that any of the melee classes do right now for MDI. But it's just an interesting choice. Like, you know, you get a little bit of a damage increase on the first boss, which at the same time is a dangerous boss in general, right? We saw how much damage these teams can take just for one of those powder shots. It's just an interesting choice that you see these teams make.
Yeah, we're King of Ruins, just moving on, doing pack by pack really now. One thing to note about this pack that they just pulled those small little rats here. They don't bolster anymore, thankfully for them, as they, you know, it got changed. I think also they changed also some of the shrine mobs, like the droplets, for example, not bolstering, not dropping sanguine, not doing any on-death affixes. And when they changed the shrine mobs, they also changed the rats here for the trappers. So we can pull the trapper pack without being worried about it bolstering the main rat too much. Therefore, that's why they're pulling it here. Now they're going to deal with the event. They're all going to get a drink here. They're all going to get drunk to be able to fight the second boss. And they're at 38%, while Big Money Crab 39%, even though Big Money Crab arrived later and they had this wipe at the start. I mean, it's a big death difference. There's 45 seconds in between those teams in favor of King of Ruins. So it's still quite a bit for Big Money Crab to catch up. But it seems like they're doing all of their trash balls a little bit faster.
Yeah, they're going, like we mentioned, they're just going for a safer strategy with their trash pulls. They're not going for the bigger pulls. And it looks like King of Ruins is even going for like more dangerous pulls than we normally see. Like, we never see the crushers pulled, or we never see crushers that don't need to be pulled, right? Usually we'll see teams pull just one of them in that Ring of Booty, like you mentioned earlier, because they kind of have to for one particular mob count for their pull. But unfortunately, inside of Big Money Crab, they have deaths right as they pull the boss. So they're going to have to reset instantly and hopefully get a res off once they finish off the trash, because they don't really have any easy way of getting back to this spot. I'm not really sure what's going on here. They might try finishing this trash off, but it's going to take them a lot of time to fix this up.
I think they pulled the boss on accident because they were still fighting some trash mobs there. They had some Buccaneers, they had the neutrals, and I don't think they wanted to pull those mobs with the boss because they don't want to bolster it, right? So I assume they pulled the boss on accident and then they were trying to reset it and went down. Either way, there's some problems for Big Money Crab, a lot of problems, as they're trying to finish these off so Concrete can get the mass res off. But this is going to cost them a lot of time again. As King of Ruins having a lot smoother run. Both of the bosses here 20 on 20% approximately, so they're going to be very close to finishing this one off. And yeah, only one death so far for King of Ruins. They are having a smooth run, and again they're pulling a little bit slowly, but it's working out for them as Big Money Crab has so many problems.
I mean, we just mentioned it took them a minute to finish off that trash, and they have to get the res off afterwards. They lost so much time to that just now, and I'm not really sure why are they getting drunk again now after they already pulled the boss. Oh, I see. No, they pulled the boss before.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, before they did the RP, so they had all three instead of just two. That's I don't think we've ever seen a team do that before. Yeah. That's really interesting. So we're gonna have to see how Big Money Crab plans to deal with this boss now. They just now finished the RP. Everyone has gotten their drunk buff, and I mean, they're going to be pulling the boss, but King of Ruins is playing really well right now. They're doing some pretty big trash pulls. You know, not the biggest trash pulls you've seen in this dungeon, but they're able to pull them off relatively cleanly.
Yeah, definitely. You see, this is one of the bigger trash pulls that you have to do. Well, you don't have to do this, but most of the teams are doing it just because it's so efficient. It gives a lot of percentage. But there's some dangerous mobs in here. You have the Harpioners, you have the Scrappers who constantly cast the Fixate. Now, the Fixate can actually be stopped by either removing it with Soothe from the Rastdude, or you can stun it as well. Any sort of stun will remove the Fixate as well. So any sort of those utilities you should be using, especially because of bolstering. So once those mobs drop low and some of them die and bolster the others, you definitely don't want to get hit by any of those Fixate costs. And also the Harpooners with the Dragoness, you can just see being casted and the rest of it over and over. That's do a lot of damage once they're bolstered. So you definitely want to be sure that none of those abilities hit you once they're bolstered.
Yep, I mean, once again, this is a thing with Warlock, right? If you look at the side of Big Money Crab there, you can see 2-target cleave is supposed to be Destro's wheelhouse, and he's losing to an Assassination Rogue. It's just, I love Warlock. Obviously, I like playing it on live. It's been my main for like 6 years, but it's just not in a great spot right now. And as fun as it is to talk about it in MDI play, I just don't think it's that great of a pick. There's just too many problems with it right now. But yeah, they're dealing with the boss quickly, and I mean, Big Money Crab, they've dealt with this boss very quickly. They have their Lust on available. Still, they didn't choose to use it on the Council of Captains, even though it's probably one of the more dangerous bosses in the dungeon. I mean, you know, they're they have room to come back. I mean, the biggest problem is going to be those 13 deaths on the board. That's an extra minute worth of time that they are behind King of Ruins, and King of Ruins is just further in the dungeon in terms of progression. So at this point, King of Ruins is going to have to make some mistakes, and so far they've been almost flawless in this dungeon. They just had that one tiny mistake earlier.
Yeah. So to be honest, we were saying that Big Money Crab are slightly favored to win against King of Ruins, because yesterday it looked like Big Money Crab was almost won against Black Mamba, and they were doing pretty well. But let's be honest here, Black Mamba made some huge mistakes in that series, so it was not really that Big Money Crab played incredibly well, but it's more so that Black Mamba played pretty poorly, and that's why Big Money Crab almost won. While King of Ruins, they were playing against Buff Winner Broke, so they were playing against the favorites to win the whole tournament, and this is the first time they even appear in a tournament at all, King of Ruins that is. So I think maybe we were a little bit too early to judge them, because right now they're looking pretty solid. For their first cup performance, you know, that they lose against the very first seed, or the second seed rather, that's going to be a thing, right? But now that they play against a lower tier team, they're looking pretty solid.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. They're doing a good job so far. And I mean, that's an interesting use of Bloodlust, but it makes sense. This is a fortified dungeon. Ludwig has a lot of HP, and they're also cleaving it on top of a bunch of trash, plus that Crusher, which is the pull that we typically see from a lot of teams on this. The biggest difference is that we normally see this pulled with either 1 or 2 Unholy DKs, so they can take advantage of that exponential AoE. I haven't got to talk about Unholy that much this week.
Yeah,
I'm kind of upset.
that's true.
It's kind of my thing. I like talking about Unholy DKs, and these teams aren't letting me do it. I feel kind of deprived. Honestly,
talk about Fury Warrior if you want.
I don't know anything about Fury Warrior, to be honest with you, so I couldn't do that if I wanted to. Do you know anything about him?
No, unfortunately not.
Geez.
But we should study up on Fury Warrior, because that's what the East region is playing almost every single game, right? We haven't been talking about them too much, because this is to be honest, the first time we see them played as much as they are right now, because none of the other regions or the cups before had this many Fury Warriors. Unfortunately, DDB is going down here for King of Ruins. They do have a battle rest, so they are going to get him back up. But yeah, King of Ruins pulling quite a lot of Crushers, interestingly enough, even though it is a bolstering environment, and of course the Crushers have a lot more HP than the rest of the mobs, but it really just seems like they seem to want to make use of single target focus damage from their melee lineup.
Yeah, okay. I honestly don't know how I don't know anything about Fury Warriors. They've been a relevant class for a long time, especially in Raid. It's I think it's something we should probably know more about, to be honest with you. But to be fair, they've
they
done a
can
lot.
execute.
Oh yeah, I think one of their abilities is called Rampage. Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't know what it does, but they've got it. That's something that they hit every now and then.
There's like an Enrage button, and you can see that one.
Oh, is that what that is?
They've got Rage or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, they've got Red Energy, so they've got that going for them as well, and they use that.
Brown
sometimes.
Rogues.
Yeah, Brown Rogues. Yeah, maybe I should study up on those before BlizzCon. We'll have to see you. That's kind of an important thing to look at. Yeah, no, but to be fair, there've been a lot of class changes in the past couple of years, so I don't think Warriors have been too relevant this expansion outside of just bringing the attack power buff. I mean, they've been good in a couple situations, but it's not really been too relevant in terms of high Mythic Plus pushing or MDI that much for this year. Rogues have just been kind of dominant, and then we've had Unholy DK come out for the past couple of weekends. So yeah, Fury Warriors just seems kind of like a niche play, something that they play if they're comfortable on it, not necessarily something that's seen as top end in the meta right now. Maybe let's say like B tier or something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely I mean, we've also seen it last weekend for the Western region. I think Now was playing it for Method EU because Maris was tanking on his Brewmaster, but that's, you know, that was a weekend where they were already qualified. They didn't need to bring anything, like they didn't need to bring their A game, they didn't need to bring their A comp either, so they were just having some fun and having Now on the DPS role, not because, you know, Fury Warrior is something that they think is the best class to go with. Either way, King of Ruins, they are on Trothek now, so 60% on Trothek. You can see Greeno guiding the Sharks around, making sure that the Sharks go into those red pools on the floor. If they go into the red pools, they will be stunned for a couple of seconds, and they will be slower as well. So there we go. That's why the rest of it, unfortunately, has to do all of that work and can't go in melee range and kite. Now, on the other hand, Big Money Crab, they have the Warlock, so in theory the Warlock could be kiting the Sharks, but I very highly doubt that he will do so because he's going to lose a lot of DPS. So I think, well, possibly. Do you think that the Warlock will kite and let the Paladin DPS?
Do you know how Destro movement is?
Yeah.
If a Destro lock has to move, they're going to be cursing up a storm in the Discord, yelling at their healer, "You know, get this off me! I don't care if your wings is up. Come get it right now."
Nice, a team player though.
No, is he a team? Okay, he was a team player yesterday. That's true. We'll have to keep an eye on that. But they have no. The only thing they can cast on the move is conflagrate, and that's like an 8 to 10 second cooldown depending on how much haste you have. It's not great. You can,
only they had a wand.
Oh, you know what? That'd be
right?
So smart. They could swap to their wand. Unfortunately, we haven't had the range slot available for about 6 years, so I don't think there's any way of that being possible. But yeah, unfortunate to see that from them. I completely forgot what I was going to say on the side of King of Ruins. Unfortunately, it was great insight too. It was going to be a fantastic thing to talk about, but I can't remember.
You know what? I'm going to keep talking. You think about what you were trying to say. As King of Ruins is finishing off Trothek here. Now they need 18% more of trash, which usually we see teams doing it in the Harlan Suite area, in the last boss area. Now, the problem is it is bolstering, so you can't put it on top of the boss. You can't make use of this friendly fire damage from the bombardment there. So we'll see if they do something else. It looks like they intentionally pulled this. They're not trying to go past this with Shadow Melt, so they didn't want to deal with some trash here. Now, I definitely think they should do some of the last percentage in the last boss area just because of the painful motivation, which basically means that they will just finish themselves off. Basically, you just need to wait until they cast the painful motivation. They will buff themselves and 2 more other mobs, and then they will kill themselves with a damage over time effect on them. So that will just be a lot faster than you killing them off. So I really hope they're going to make use of that at least. But yeah, definitely a reason why they're not pulling trash on top of the last boss is because of the bolstering affix here.
I remember what it was. I was going to talk about the perfect timing too. I was going to say it'd be a lot more pleasurable for me to watch Warrior play if they were playing male Orc. There's something about Warriors playing male Orc that just makes me laugh so much. I think the leap animation is hilarious, and I think male Orc Warrior is like the most meathead type DPS class in the game. That's just what it screams to me. So unfortunately, we have the Shadow Meld meta right now where everyone plays Night Elf, but man, in a non-Shadow Meld meta, I want to see those Orc Warriors come out in force.
We should ask now about that one. Maybe one day he will bring the Orc Warrior with Method EU, and maybe he will pull a Shark in Motherload as well, which is something I wanted to see for the longest time, but no one ever does it. As they are, King of Ruins actually pulling the Void Touch Emissary here with the Ravagers, so I'm not sure if this was intended or not. Seems like Reno is trying to get a Shadow Melt off, and there we go. Did manage to get out of combat, I believe. He might be in combat with the Void Touch Emissary, actually. No, there we go. Okay, so he does manage to get the Mass Rest off. They still need 8% trash, so they definitely need to do something right after the boss. I assume they want to do the boss first. They don't have Bloodlust available though to them. They have 1 Battle Rest and a second one very soon, so they have the safety net here. While Big Money Crab still struggling a little bit. They're dealing with a lot of trash. And they're already on 90% actually, so doing a lot of trash before they even get to the last boss area on their side.
Well, they can just skip with Gateway whenever they get to Harlan Suite, right? So they can get all the trash done right now, and then they're probably just planning on single targeting the boss down, which is kind of the normal live push strat we see from most teams. And I think Big Money Crab, like we've been talking about the entire weekend, they just go for the typical live push strategies that we've seen on live for the past year or so. So they're not really going for the big MDI pulls, which is an interesting choice for them because, I mean, we know that the MDI strategies are obviously faster, right? That's why we call them the MDI strategies. But in the Eastern region where we've seen a lot of teams have problems doing the MDI strategy, it's definitely, you know, something you can do. You can probably get 2nd or 3rd place in a tournament. We've seen Black Mamba do it.
Yeah.
Just going for easy strategies that you know have a very low failure rate, and Big Money Crab is sticking to their guns.
Yeah, so they're now fighting Troth. Like, they only need 4% more trash, which probably is a Ravager pack they will do later on. And there we go. Nice, is actually kiting the Shark. Look at that. Concrete is in melee range, doing damage on the Holy Paladin, while Niles is sacrificing his own damage to kite the Shark. This is what I like to see. Supporting the healers, while all the other melee brain DPS, you know, they don't care about those healers. You should, you know what? Niles needs to have a talk with you, Sarah.
Disgusting. First of all, the talk would be stop playing Warlock in the MDI. But the second of all, there's so much. Okay, ask for sack from the Paladin. Ask for wall. His cooldowns were up and he was running. I'm just disgusted. I don't want to talk anymore.
All right then, King of Ruins is still fighting Harlan Suite. Once they reach 30%, then the boss will take increased damage, and that's why, of course, all of the damage dealers are saving their cooldowns for the very last minute just to top the damage meters, even though that means you're still going to kill the boss slower. But if you top the damage meters, then you know you're the best player, and all the viewers also know that you're the best player, so that's definitely what you want to do on Harlan Suite. Listen up, in case you want to compete in the MDI later on, guys, then just make sure you do exactly as I say right here, and we'll see DDB the best player in King of Ruins here on the Outlaw Rogue. But after Harlem Suite, they still need to do 8% trash. Again, they're probably just going to pull a Ravager pack and make use of this painful motivation.
Well, I wonder exactly which one they're going to pull, because they already pulled the 2 at the start, right? When they skipped up here, because their tank died pulling that trash pack. So their first Ravager, they definitely had one of their Ravagers die. I don't know if the other one's available. And it looks like they kind of don't know what they're doing either. They're kind of like looking around like, yo, where's the Ravager at? And they're just going to pull a pack that doesn't have a Ravager in it at all. This looks like a interesting miscalculation from them. Fortunately, because they've played relatively clean compared to Big Money Crab here, they have plenty of time to deal with this. They have almost, I'd say, 3 minutes to deal with 8% trash, so they can do whatever they want at this point. They even have their Bloodlust coming up in 10 minutes, so we're going to see some rampaging again, I guess, from the Fury Warrior here, and they'll just finish off the rest of their trash whenever their Bloodlust comes up.
Oh, they just bolstered. They just bolstered. Oh, no. Yeah, they had an Oatsman come up there with, I believe, a painful motivation on them, so they just bolstered the whole trash pack they were fighting right now. I'm not sure if it was only 1 bolster stack or 2 from more mobs, but yeah, they have Bloodlust available. They seem to not notice that they have it available, but to be honest, they only have 2% trash left, so they probably didn't really think about their Bloodlust timer, unfortunately. But there we go.
Hey.
Going 1-0.
No button required onto that one. They're the King of Ruins, and they've taken game number 1 on Freehold off the back of Big Money Crab, just having some big money wipes in that one, Settles.
Yeah, bold stance here. Holy Paladin in Void Heavy Freehold. Not the move, I must admit.
You have a lot of issues when you're not able to Shadow Meld past it, and you always kind of like limit yourself on what you can actually kill and cannot kill.
Yeah, you had to see them pull that 9-pack at the very beginning that they had so many deaths on. Like right here, like this Void Touched Emissary, I don't think we've seen it pulled by pretty much any team up until this point. And the reason for it being is because it is so dangerous for your tank, especially in like a bolstering scenario where all the mobs have like a disproportionate amount of health. Like those Enforcers have like a 1.5 times more health than the rest of the pack. That really set Big Money Crab behind just like at the very start of the match, which allowed King of Ruins to be able to take this whole entire thing. They made decent pacing through Trothak and through Harlan Suite, making sure that they utilized Shadow Meld to its fullest effectiveness. Even though they didn't use their Bloodlust towards the end of the dungeon, they really didn't need it. They were just so far ahead just because of being able to skip all of the Void Emissaries.
I was really worried about that very high bolster on the officer there. I thought he was going to destroy the tank.
Yeah, that bolstering that officer is actually very dangerous for your tank. At least it wasn't an Enforcer, I guess, right?
So I have an idea. What if they would have replaced the Warlock with a Hunter and kept the Holy Paladin, because the Hunter could have done all of those ranged jobs a lot better than a Warlock could have.
I think they just have to death skip.
Right.
So like they pulled like 4 Void Emissaries where we saw King of Ruin literally pull 0 of them. So it's so challenging to be able to make up time off a mob that is so inefficient, because that Void Touched Emissary doesn't need to be done by itself, but the pull size is significantly limited relative to pulling it with any other like trash packs.
Or you just need to not do it and just run away
exactly.
from
Just don't do it. Just Shadow Meld and walk away from it.
Yeah, and with the Shadow Meld, they have the opportunity to do so. And speaking of Void Emissaries, though, we're also going to have another Void Emissary for Tol Dagor coming up, and that's Fortified and Grievous as well. We were seeing a couple teams as well having struggle buses with the Sand Shifter, the Sand Queen at the very beginning there, Nagra.
Yeah, so we had a lot of teams just completely have full team wipes on that boss just because of, I think Skittish was a little bit of a problem there too, just because of all the drones spawning, and the healer immediately got aggro, and DPS couldn't hold back on their AoE buttons, and then they got aggro too. And then on top of that, you just have Grievous, and just everything just ticks down, and it's huge problems for the healers in general, even on a fortified setting, just causing a lot of problems.
Yep, and I know Zeronic firsthand causing all those problems with bolstering or bursting.
No, not me. I'm a good DPS. I don't do anything wrong ever.
Well, I liked how you started off when we were talking about Warlocks in the beginning. You're like, oh yeah, they just can't control their AoE. They're just having to bolster everything. I'm getting some bad flashbacks off the start.
Man, not me. I'm a perfect player. What can I say now?
Oh, all right. The trial will continue of Zyronic's crimes of bolstering and rolling my bursting. But first, we'll be taking a quick break before we go into game number 2. We'll be on Tol Dagor, so don't go anywhere, guys. MDI will return right after this. Welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon International as we're entering our second game for our first series between Big Money Crab and King of Ruin. And while we've mentioned before, we know the 6 teams that are going to be going to BlizzCon, and if you'd like to support them, be sure to check out the Hoarder Alliance fireworks or the Transmorpher Beacon, as it's a great way to get an awesome toy and support the prize pool for BlizzCon, which is month and a half away. It's
Wow.
getting close, and I cannot wait to start seeing how these teams are going to be showing. And Buff War Nerf Rogue, we touched on it a lot, especially as Ironic, where this is a team that we want to be watching not only as they compete with some of the other teams in the East alone, but how they start matching up against the West as we're getting ready for BlizzCon.
I think that's the story. We talked about it a lot yesterday. The whole story for this tournament for me is how good is Buff War Nerf Rogue looking going into this is the final tournament. This is the last chance they have to practice in tournament play. And obviously, I think the competition isn't as strong as we're going to see from BlizzCon from the Western teams. And, Team D, hopefully they're feeling better by then. But we just need to see if they're prepped, how good they're looking right now. So I'm really kind of looking at Buff War Nerf Rogue over any other team this tournament.
Yeah, King of Ruin did end up losing against Buff War Nerf Rogue, and after a rough King's Rest run. And in particular, we want to be able to watch them and see if they're going to be getting back to play against them, get any kind of rematch, because it's going to be requiring a tough road. They're going to have to getting through Big Money Crab, Best Old and Scuffed, and then the winner between Black Mamba and Buff War Nerf Rogue as well. And Black Mamba in particular has been that team that's always kind of back and forth. So in many cases, Nigger, I think East is always, who are we looking at right now? We saw Big Money Crab last season. They're coming back once again. Who do we see now? Who are we expecting to see later on in 2020?
I think definitely Black Mamba is going to be a team that wants to stick around. They definitely want to make sure they, build some more synergy. I know this time around they won't make it to BlizzCon, but they take every single cup for practice. They're trying to qualify every single cup. They're trying to improve their play. So I think Black Mamba is a team that definitely has a lot of room to improve, because it always seems like they're doing really well for time trials, but then they don't do so well in actual cup play, as we talked about earlier with Saro. So I think that's a team that just needs to maybe compose themselves better during cup play, because they have the potential to be good. They're just not really showing up when it matters, right? So maybe if they can get that under control, then they will be a team that can maybe be up there with Buff War Nerf Rogue Team D.
It'll be interesting to see, because, we've seen back and forth from Big Money Crab in particular, and looking at Tol Dagor, Tettles, we've seen a number of times where teams are just struggling to be able to line up all of the mobs that they need to, taking proper advantage of those cannons.
I think it just comes down to practice with how you end up dealing with the cannon. The cannons got changed a little bit this season to where you only have 5 shots because it's based off their energy. And on like this 18 situation, you need to be able to make sure that you actually get all 5 shots off on all the mobs. In previous seasons, we would just like see people pull and just like cannon down everything because you had unlimited amounts of shots. But now, since every shot matters, it requires you to be able to get all the mobs stacked up very tightly in a way that some teams just like really struggle with. It just comes down to practice at the end of the day. Utilizing Ring of Peace, we've seen Ring of Frosts come through. Any amount of CC, AoE stuns, or anything just to make sure that the mobs get grouped up is very important.
Yeah, then those teams, I mean, we've seen the Holy Paladin and the Warlock, so not having a Shadow Meld is actually kind of a big deal in Tol Dagor, because there's quite a lot of skips that you want to do. So we'll see if they even change up their lineup just to have more Shadow Melds available.
Even more skips required than usual, because it's also going to be in the Void Heavy week for Beguiling as well. So that bogged them down in the Freehold. Let's see how it goes in Tol Dagor.
So they're sticking to their no Shadow Meld comp here for Big Money Crab, as they stick to the Warlock and also the Holy Paladin. This is going to be very interesting to see how they really handle this dungeon. They probably just want to go through, kill everything instead of trying the skips, because the Void Emissaries, the only way of skipping them is by using Shadow Meld or killing them off. There's no way to shroud past it because of the true side. So definitely going to see what Big Money Crab does with that, as King of Ruins is doing a trash pull first and Big Money Crab is going straight to the boss.
I mean, King of Ruins, I said Big Money Crab had a little bit of an advantage coming into this series because of how they played against Black Mamba, but I think that's a little bad to say, or it's not necessarily that accurate, because Black Mamba didn't look that good either in their match. It looks like Big Money Crab just kind of would have won by attrition because they kind of played the same style that Black Mamba did, but neither of the teams played it very well. I think King of Ruins, as long as they're able to not wipe to this first boss like 4 times like they did yesterday, they should be able to take this purely based off of their comp, because they have the 5 Shadow Melds available, because they can do all the skips in the dungeon if they pull them off properly. That saves you so much time here over just having to kill every single Void Emissary you come across, because it wastes so much time. It's so trash inefficient, and if you can get to the cannon, you can use the cannon efficiently. you will just win this dungeon if you do it properly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, King of Ruins having so many problems last time around. Maybe that's probably the reason why they go a little bit slower here, do some of the trash before they pull the boss. But this time they also pulled some of the Parasite packs on top of Sand Queen here in the pool. They also used the Bloodlust. But as long as Greeno makes sure that his group stays alive here, immediately using the Innervate as well, as you can see right off the bat using Innervate. And it's really the Grievous that causes so many problems on this fight, because those drones, the Leave Behind, that bleed debuff that stacks, and unfortunately Greeno being the one who also gets the upheaval here, not using his Shadow Meld. I'm pretty sure you were able to avoid the upheaval with Shadow Meld, so interesting to see that he's not choosing to do that. Maybe he wants to save the Shadow Meld later on for a more difficult upheaval. Later on there's a Shadow Meld doing right after a sandstorm that causes a lot of problems, so maybe he wants to just save it for a later opponent.
Not only Shadow Meld, but I'm pretty sure you can wild charge it too pretty consistently, right? So
wild charge is a little bit more difficult, because you know,
the exact timing,
there's
right?
Yeah, exactly, and there's also the drones on the floor. If you wild charge through them, you get stunned and you might die. So it's a little bit difficult, but you can do it if you want.
I mean, there are exact timings for this fight. Like, for instance, if you play an instant blink class like a mage or a warlock, and this is depending on your ping as well, but as a mage, you can blink at exactly 0.3 seconds before the ability. Obviously, once again, depending on your ping, and you'll dodge the upheaval every single time it's on you. It works for any instant ability. I imagine there's a little bit of you have to do it a little bit earlier for travel time abilities like grappling hook or wild charge for that matter as well. But you can, if you have a movement ability, you can consistently dodge the ability every time. So it doesn't make sense to just eat it to the face. Now, of course, as a druid, you can also just go bare form too, which is what I think we saw him do there. Hopefully he went bare form. But yeah, it's just something. It doesn't make sense to just eat it to the face when you have the ability to dodge it. Maybe that's just something they're not practicing doing, or maybe they're a little scared because they wiped this a couple times yesterday and they really want to make sure they get through it. But it looks like they're doing a good job of it so far. They just probably dealt with the last pack of buzzing drones they're going to get. They might get one more right after this upheaval. And like we just saw, I mean, the warrior leaped away from the upheaval, took no damage. Perfect execution from him. And as they're killing this boss, we just saw Big Money Crab deal with the first of a large amount of Void Emissaries that they're going to have to deal with in this dungeon.
Yeah, and this Thug that they just pulled also is a mob that does have True Sight, so the only way to dodge it is by either have somebody pull it away and let the other ones run through, or you have Shadow Meld. Now, again, Big Money Crab, not a team that can Shadow Meld, so they just choose to kill the Thug with some other trash on top. This trash almost never has been killed by any MDI teams because it's pretty inefficient, and especially this Tol Dagor, right? Tol Dagor, a dungeon where you want to do as least trash as possible without the cannons, because the cannons are just so efficient later on. But if you're not practiced in the cannon area and you're not sure exactly how to deal with it, especially now with the limited amount of shots that you have in each cannon with only having 5, if you're not well enough practice to do a huge amount of trash with the cannons, then this is just a safer way to deal with your trash. And then later on you can only do the cannon, like the actual trash that is in the balcony area around the cannons, instead of going back inside the house and gathering even more, because we've seen multiple teams have lots of problems even when they practice a lot in that cannon area, just because it's so difficult to stack it all up in the same exact spot, and then you only have those 5 shots in each cannon to get all of the trash down.
Okay, what's King of Ruins doing right now, though? They're doing something really interesting. We almost never see these mobs pulled. They even have a Vice Jaw, one of those crocodiles in there as well. Looks like they're just going to tank it and DPS it, and it must have been a failed Shadow Meld skip. Because you see the tank did use his Shadow Meld about a minute ago. A couple other DPS did as well, so they must have just messed up a skip, and this must be the residual of that. Like, they're dealing with it. Well, it looked dangerous for a second there. You even saw that Tranquility coming out of Greeno. When I saw the Tranquility, I'm like, when do you use Tranquility during a skip? There's something going wrong here for them. But it looks like they're going to go ahead and be able to deal with this. That tank's dropping incredibly low here. And of course, the big deal is every single time you get hit by one of those abilities from the Sewer Vice Jaw, those crocodiles, they reduce your maximum HP by a pretty significant amount. So you kind of see tanks end up kiting them around after they get enough stacks. But they do somehow end up pulling it off. They get through it. And I'm interested to see what they're planning on doing for trash here. If they're going to pull trash in this room like we see from Big Money Crab, or if they're going to try to do just more of this sort of MDI-style skips that we see from a lot of teams.
Yeah, and I mean, Grievous is really an affix that does cause a lot of problems for prod warriors in general, just because usually at the start of a pull they tend to drop pretty low, and then they have a lot of mitigation against physical damage, and they're able to survive for a long time, but they don't have any self-healing. It's very they don't have anything to top themselves off, so the healer has struggled to heal away those Grievous stacks, and very often they will go all the way to 4 stacks and then just sit on 4 stacks for a long time, just having so much extra damage on them while tanking all of these mobs. So that's definitely a problem that Proud Warriors have in general. Big Money Crab, though, they're already dealing with this next Void Touch Emissary. Very, again, just unfortunate for them to having to deal with all of those emissaries because they don't have Shadow Melt available. It seems so inefficient, just because you need to focus it down so fast, else you die, or you have to Light of Sight, which causes you to lose a lot of damage, and then you can't really pull that much trash on top of the Void Touch emissaries because if you have a lot of trash that needs to be interrupted, needs to be stunned, then you lose damage on the Void Touch emissary, and then you get too many AoEs, and you just it's just too complicated to do. So that's just slowing Big Money Crab down quite a bit. But King of Ruins, they have the Shadow Melt, and they're not using it either, or at least they're not using it to success. So they're having lots of problems on their side too.
It looks like there was a miscommunication from the team there. I think DDB thought it is DDB. It looks like he thought his team was going to skip past his trash and res him further on, because it looks like he just solo died after opening one of the crate cages on the floor below this while they were trying to get buffs for the team, and instead they opted to pull the trash pack, and he died, and now he released and he has to run back to the group, so he's not going to be with the group until just now. It took him about 30 seconds to get back, so took just a little bit of time loss, bad communication from the team there, but I mean, they're playing just a little bit better in this dungeon so far than Big Money Crab is. They're just doing a little bit bigger pulls. They've got the skips available with the rogues if they choose to actually use them at any point in the dungeon, and I just think I like their comp a little bit more. This is not, once again, this is not a dungeon for Warlock, and because they don't have any skips on the board, they're going to have to deal with not only this Void Emissary in this room, but every other Void Emissary for the rest of the dungeon. So it's going to be interesting to see how Big Money Crab is going to have any chance of pulling this out here. And something we haven't mentioned at all is I don't think either of these teams have any way to pull Jes Howlis through the door. I think they're both going to have to go all the way around. Neither of them are running that Windwalker lock.
True. Yeah, that's what Big Money Crab is doing, right? That's actually one thing they could have done to avoid the Void Touch Emissary here by pulling Jes Howlis through the wall. That they wouldn't even have to go in this area at all. But because they can't do it, they have to go around and have to deal with the Void Touch Emissary and have to deal with all of these trash, which is causing them so much trouble. I mean, they're not wiping, but it's just taking them such a long time. As you can see, they have to kite all the way back, all of those C speakers being so dangerous on the tank, and then they constantly cast the Water Dome as well, which is not dispellable because they play Alliance, so they don't have the Horde ratio. You know what? Maybe it actually would have been a better choice for them to just play Horde. If they can't have the Shadow Melt anyway on 2 characters, maybe playing Horde here, being able to dispel the Water Domes, might have been a better idea for Big Money Crab.
And then we could see the Orc Warrior too. That's just a win-win for everyone. I would love to see that. Hopefully they hear us and they can do that if they win this match and do it in the next round. I doubt they have those characters set up, to be honest. That'd be great to see. And yeah, I mean, both teams are going to have to slowly progress through this entire floor before they get to Jes Howlis, and it looks like they pulled the Void Touch Emissary on the side of King of Ruins here before they even got there, but that shouldn't be too big of a deal. They should be able to LOS it around the corner while they deal with off the rest of these Arsonists, but this is a lot of tank damage. He's got 5 stacks of that Torch debuff.
Yeah, and you also see the Grievous, again, just causing so many problems for the tank here, and especially with the Dispel as well. The Torch can be dispelled by the Rasta Druid, but with an 8-second cooldown on the Dispel, sometimes you dispel after 2 stacks, and then immediately afterwards you get another 2 or even 3. As you can see, the Dispel being on cooldown right now, and as soon as the Dispel came off, he did Dispel again, but another 2 stacks as soon as the Dispel came out of Greeno here. So very unfortunate for King of Ruins. Big Money Crab, again, dealing with another Void Touch Emissary, as you can see on their side. At least Big Money Crab, though, is playing it pretty cleanly. I mean, they have 1 death so far, and they're playing very slowly, but outside of that, they're having a clean run. Now, unfortunately, this pack that you can see them pull right now is a pretty dangerous pack, and it already has Water Domes on all of it.
Yeah, I mean, once again, that's kind of one of the things that we don't see a lot of teams have to worry about, because this is really the only section of the dungeon that has those C speakers in it. So the Watery Dome cast, of course, we don't ever talk about that ability because most teams don't deal with it. They just pull the boss through the wall, so they don't have to pull any of this trash in the dungeon. But the biggest deal is it puts an AoE shield on every single mob around it, and the best way to deal with that, of course, would be an Arcane Torrent from a Blood Elf, from a Horde character, which would instantly dispel every single mob around it. But neither of the teams have that available to them because they're both playing Alliance, so they just have to make sure they get all those interrupts off, and they're not doing a very good job of that on the side of King of Ruins right now.
And King of Ruins also having the Watery Dome on the on the Void-Touched Emissary, unfortunately. So with the shield and the Void-Touched Emissary, it's just so hard for them to finish it off. So they just decide to kite instead and go line of sight of the Void-Touched Emissary. But you can see all of those shields and all the mobs, they either have to damage through the shield or they have to wait until it falls off naturally, because they don't have any offensive dispels either. There's nothing like a mage or a shaman in their groups, so no way for them to get rid of the those watery domes. So now they're just slowly chewing through this HP, and as they try to line of sight this Void-Touched Emissary too, they have to be super careful, because if they step the wrong way, they're gonna get hit by that AoE from that Void Touch. Well, Big Money Crab is already fighting Jes Howlis now. This is the chance for Jes Howlis to get ahead. No, for Big Money Crab to get ahead, as they're already fighting there, and they're actually even in trash. So yeah, looked like Big Money Crab is behind, and we also talked about their comp being worse. But with King of Ruins not really making use of their Shadow Melts, to be honest, it's them that they are behind.
Yeah, they're definitely not making the best use of their class comp for this dungeon so far. It's interesting to see that. And it's funny that you talk about Jes Howlis getting ahead in this dungeon. I think out of all the bosses we have throughout every single dungeon, I think Jes Howlis has the highest KDA against any of our teams.
So, yeah.
By far. We've even seen some of the best teams wipe to this boss. It's kind of ridiculous what happens here. But of course, most of those wipes are during Explosive Week, when there's a lot that can go wrong, especially when you get stunned here after pulling Raiders. You know, explosives could spawn on those Raiders. You wouldn't be able to deal with them because you're stunned, and then your group just wipes. I think the Grievous affix might be a problem if they start taking too much residual damage. If their rogues aren't perfectly tricksing the tank. It is a skittish environment, so they have to be careful about aggro. But most of the time we see teams pre-open these cages, it doesn't really look like they've done that here, so they might have to deal with a couple of extra mobs, unfortunately. But you just have to keep an eye on aggro here. As long as the tank has aggro and things, they should be fine. Big Money Crab is pretty much done with the boss. They don't have to deal with any extra interrupts. All their ads are dead, so good on their side, but we'll have to keep an eye on King of Ruins here.
And look at the damage coming out of the Fury Warrior here for Big Money Crab, as it's doing almost 80k DPS. And now you obviously should be comparing Big Money Crab's warrior damage to King of Ruins' warrior damage, and whoever does more is the better warrior. That's how it works, so make sure you keep an eye on that one. As King of Ruins actually popping their Bloodlust, same as Big Money Crab, so both of them think they're gonna get an extra usage at the very end of the dungeon, else they probably would have saved it. And yeah, look at the trash percentage. Both of them being above 50%. This is something we usually don't see in Tol Dagor. Usually we see teams go around 30% trash before they go to the cannon area. They skip so much trash inside the house just to be able to get most of the trash later on with the cannon part, where they get approximately 70, even more percent on the balcony cannon area. But both King of Ruins and Big Money Crab choosing not to do so. This really just means that they are probably not practiced with the cannon area, because not only do you need a perfect setup, you need to practice it multiple times to be able to pull it off properly, because you don't have multiple tries. Each cannon only has 5 shots, so if you miss them and if you don't manage to set up the pull properly, then all of a sudden your whole strategy is not going to work out anymore, because the shots on the cannons are not going to come back.
Well, to further exacerbate that problem, neither of the teams have a particularly good comp for dealing with the cannon. Neither of them have a Monk for Ring of Peace. The only good class they have for any CC on either side is the Druid on the side of King of Ruins for that Ursul's with the punt as well, so they can get everything slowed and stacked for a couple seconds. But outside of that, there's just not a lot going on. They've just got AoE stuns, which are great, but you got to stack everything up first before we worry about the stuns. So I'm just really interested to see how they plan on using the cannons, like if at all. If they just, like, maybe they only use it for the stuff that's on the bridge.
Yeah, I think so as well. Big Money Crab not even having a Druid on their side, so they don't have Ring of Peace, they don't have Vortex, they don't have Typhoon. They actually have nothing outside of AoE stuns, which DR each other, right? So you can't permanently you can't stun them over and over. So that's definitely going to be a problem for them. And yeah, you're probably right. I think they're only going to deal with the balcony trash itself, or maybe even skip some of it on the balcony area and try to do some sort of death skip with soul stones on the healer. Either way, we'll see what they do, as they still deal with trash inside this house area. As King of Ruins actually using one of their shrouds to go past some of the trash. This is I think King of Ruins is really playing one of those like old life strategies where you deal with quite a amount of trash inside. Now they have to deal with this Void Touch Emissary before they use the cannon, just because it's standing right in front of it, so you can't really avoid this Void Touch Emissary at all. Even if you have Shadow Melt, there's nothing you can do about this, and you just have to deal with it.
I mean, a lot of the advantages that we're talking about for King of Ruins are just completely null right now. They're at the same trash percentage. They're past all of the Void Emissaries that you could skip past. And I mean, you see how dangerous this section of the dungeon is. They have 2 deaths to this first Void Touched Emissary that they tried to line of sight, but they got hit by the I believe the explosion from the Marine.
Yeah, I think they didn't move the barrel actually. The barrel wasn't moved, so it ignited, and it was causing a lot of problems for him. So that was just a mistake, but not moving that barrel, because it can be picked up. That's usually what you do as soon as you get there. You have one designated player who will pick it up. Most of the time the healer, but can also be anyone really. Picks it up, pulls it away, just because if it's ignited by any of the mobs or the cannon, it will cast this huge area of denial, that explosion, like Valeri, right? This is the exact same ability as Valeri has, the next boss. And so it's causing... It really just seems like they're really not practicing this dungeon, for King of Ruins, that is. And they also showed it yesterday as they were playing against Buffalo and Rogue. Now, it's unfortunate to see, to be honest, because if this is their second series, and both of the series had Tol Dagor in it, so it really seems like that should be a dungeon they are practicing. So unfortunate to see that King of Ruins really didn't put much time into this.
Yep, well, fortunately, it was an interesting choice from them to go ahead and call a wipe there, but the thing is, they only had 1 DPS alive, and they would have had to finish off that Void Touched Emissary, so smart. Actually, I think in the end it was a smart play for them to have both the Rogue that was alive still, plus the Druid Shadow Melt out of combat. I think that's the first effective use of it we've seen out of them this entire dungeon, and unfortunately was to salvage a wipe, so not exactly what you want to see, but at least it shows that there's, you know, the ability to make a heads-up play from their team there. So I do like to see that in the end. They do know what they're doing to some extent and on that pull there. So good execution there. And of course, the big thing about that is the Void Touched Emissary does keep its health value when you die, but unfortunately, Greeno goes down here. There's no way to res him up, and they just ended up committing to a big pull. And it is a grievous affix, so they're going to be able to stay alive for a little bit of time here, but they don't really have any way to heal anyone up outside the Rogues. They can Crimson Vial themselves, they can use their healing potions, but once the tank goes down, all they have are the reposts from the Rogue, and they're going to have to get in that cannon to finish this trash off, and I don't know if they want to commit to that.
Yeah, this is a big problem. Full team wipe coming in for King of Ruins here. Greeno released and got in combat again with something, so he's going to go down again as he does not have Shadow Melt available. I mean, it's going to be available very soon, so maybe he's going to get it off. As you can see, he's already here all the way up in the cannon area. There we go. So he did get the Shadow Melt back up, and he can cast a Mass Res. Now, I'm not completely sure if DDB is going to be able to get back up. I'm not sure if there's any true side mobs that they walked past earlier. Either way, they can just rest him back up in case there are true side mobs. Now, Big Money Crab, I mean, they're on 83% trash. They only have 1 death, so 45 seconds in favor of them. Unfortunately, they got 2 barrel explosions here, and they just barely found 1 spot to be able to survive on their side. And it's only 17% trash for them, so I mean, it's almost like the impossible is happening, that Big Money Crab is going to win this Tol Dagor with a comp that is really not made for Tol Dagor.
I mean, it's the same thing. I feel like they're just running the exact same strategies as Black Mamba, where they're running their what's supposed to be a low failure rate dungeon. It didn't work out for them in Freehold. Their low failure rate, they hit that a lot in Freehold. And King of Ruins, because they played safe, because they didn't have any wipes, they won the dungeon. But unfortunately for King of Ruins, they just haven't been able to keep it clean in this dungeon. That's all they had to do. If they kept it clean, they would win this for sure. But Big Money Crab, they haven't had any mistakes this time around. I don't like this playstyle in the MDI. You're at the mercy of your opponent. I don't think you ever want to put it in the hands of your opponent. You always want to make sure that you have the best strategy that you can possibly run, and they're just not doing that. So it's really weird to see.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yesterday as well, when I don't want to blame King of Ruins yesterday because they were playing against Buffalo and Nerf Rogue. So I feel like even if King of Ruins would have played up to their best that they could, they probably still wouldn't have won, because Buffalo and Nerf Rogue is just on another level in the East area. They're just the #1 team, right? So it's very hard to beat them. But Big Money Crab, they almost won against Black Mamba, and not particularly because they were playing that well, but rather Black Mamba was doing those big MDI pulls, and they were just not executing them properly. So they lost so much time while Big Money Crab just slowly walked through the dungeon and managed to sneak a win that way and almost won that series. But now against King of Ruins, both teams look like they're not doing any of those MDI pulls. They're both going slowly, and whichever team is executing it better is just winning. So you're probably not going to get very far with this kind of strategy, but it's working out for Big Money Crab right now. And if they win this game, it's going to be a 1-1, and we're going to go to Underrot, which is a very difficult dungeon if you're not practicing it. Just because you need to double DK if you want to do those big pulls in the Cragmire area. Like most of the teams, they just avoid the mechanics by out DPSing them. They just do so much damage that they don't have to deal with any of the mechanics. But with those kind of comps that those two teams are running, they're not going to be able to do that. They don't have any DKs in their comps. So they have to go slowly through the dungeon, and then Underrot can cause a lot of problems in the Cragmire area. Now King of Ruins just having more and more problems here, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Nagura, but I think I just have this slight suspicion that I don't think we're going to see an Unholy DK from either of these teams in that Underrot.
Very unlikely, yeah.
I just don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately, as much as I'd love to see it, because it would mean... Oh, Green, are you going to die to Grievous here? Don't. Okay. Okay. That was okay. I was about to have a moment. Yeah, that would have been unfortunate to see. But Big Money Crab, they're going to win.
Niles, did you see that? He was doing the barrels and the healers DPSing him in.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to have a talk with him once again. The list keeps piling up here. I'm writing things down on my sheet as we go. I'm not actually doing that, but imagine if I was right now. He's being a team player. That's fine, but you can see the result of that. Your DPS player is doing tank damage. So, but we get to see this insane Holy Paladin damage. That's something, right? I mean,
oh yeah.
There is something to say for it. The Holy Paladin does do a lot of damage whenever he's allowed to just do maximum DPS. So they do have some use to them. Niles, that's going to kill you if you stand in it. Okay, thank you. I mean, it's just. I mean, I don't know. Warlock's not a good class. I don't want to talk about that anymore. It hurts to see Warlock played like for the first time in cups, and it's just like. Everything that's wrong with Warlock is being put on display right now. Movement on a Warlock, terrible. Outside of cooldowns, terrible. There's just so much wrong with it.
Okay, so actually I have one question, because I was talking to Shelle, and he actually said on the last boss, I'm not sure what spec you have to play, but on the last boss you can somehow like off-dot the cannons or something like that and gain like a huge damage increase on a boss. What spec do you have to play for that?
I would assume that he's talking about destruction. You have a trait that you can run called Flashpoint, which whenever your immolate ticks on a target that's above 80% HP, you get a large amount of haste. And I believe he's running two of those right now. He's running 2 Flashpoint, 1 Crash and Chaos, and 3 Rolling Havoc. Rolling Havoc, whenever you hit Havoc, you get Intellect whenever you cast a duplicated spell, which makes sense because there's a lot of cleave in dungeons. And the Flashpoint, you can pretty much get that at the start of every pack. So yeah, the cannons are targetable, so you should be able to put an immolate on the cannons and have a huge haste buff on that boss. I'm not sure how big of a deal it'll be as Niles goes down there, but we'll have to see. I mean, it's going to give him something like, I believe, in 445 gear, it gives about 750 haste per trait, so 1,500 extra haste for the entire boss seems like it should be pretty good for him. Now, we're going to see a Soulstone skip because they have no other way to get past here.
They already have the 100% trash here, so there's no way for them to... There's also a Void Touch Emissary, which puts them in combat, so Shroud's not going to do any wonders. They actually choose to kill the trash, which...
Come on. Just go.
I have to believe that a full skip is just gonna, because they also have 3 Shadow Melts, so the only people who have to die is Concrete and Niles, right? So definitely gonna be better for them to do a death skip rather than just finishing off all of this trash. Now they also have their Bloodlust available, so we can actually see how good. And he also, does he have cooldowns available? No, he doesn't actually have cooldowns available. So maybe we won't see him pop off on the last boss, unfortunately. Oh wait,
is he far enough away? Okay, just barely.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been interesting. Yeah, they're able to res off here. And they only have to deal with this final boss. And we always mention it's not that difficult because of Fortified, but I think we've seen more egregious wipes in this dungeon so far.
Wait, I actually have a question about this animation. Did you see the Master's animation from the Holy Paladin? He was like opening up a book of light, and he was like reading it while he was...
Huh.
But is he learning how to do this ability every single time that he's Masteressing? Or like, has he not like memorized it at this point? Like, didn't he read it so many times that he doesn't need the book anymore? questions over questions. As they're actually pulling the last boss here, they popped the Bloodlust, and yeah, unfortunately, Niles doesn't seem like he has cooldowns ready. We will see how much damage he can do. Concrete, though, look at that Holy Paladin burst coming in. He's second on the damage meter, doing 40k DPS so far. Also, the Fury Warrior doing quite a bit here at the very start. Unfortunately, Niles also doesn't really have a spot here in melee range, so he has to stand on this edge. As you can see, also getting all of the bursting. That's another, I would say it's a downside actually to get all of the burstings, because so how this explosive burst works is that it will always favor ranged DPS. So if you have 3 ranged DPS, all of the range will always get the burstings. But if you have less than 3 range, then it will go on however many range you have, 1 or 2, and the third one, or the second and third one, they will rotate on the rest of your players. So may be the tank or the melee player. So if you don't have a lot of range, it will just spread out more on your group, and that's arguably better, because then you don't get 2 in a row on the same player. So having a Warlock here might be a slight disadvantage, but Warlocks are very good at surviving things, so in general they should be fun.
I mean, they're probably one of the highest self-healing DPS classes in the game, and on top of that, they just take reduced damage and Destro, so it's not that big of a deal as long as, I mean, I wouldn't surprise me if he had one of the beacons on the Warlock as well, just to make sure he always has extra heals on him, because he's going to be taking damage every time. But he's dropping, okay, he was dropping pretty low there with Grievous plus the debuff, but yeah, we talked about how dangerous this boss could be with the Grievous affix, but it looks like it's not going to be an issue for Big Money Crab, and once again, they're just playing their safe strategy, and fortunately for them in this dungeon it worked out, but we're going to go to a game 3 and see how it works out for them in Underrot.
That's right, Big Money Crab tying up the series, forcing that game number 3. And you guys had kind of mentioned it on the desk, and I'm sure Tettles was talking about it behind the desk on that end. It seemed like it was a live key strategy that was going into it. They were just running through everything. The second they encountered mobs, they were dealing with them. And we didn't really see any of those really large cannon setups that the West has kind of prepared us for.
Yeah, I think I've seen a similar strategy from myself today. Whenever I was doing a Tol Dagor on live, I think we 2-chested the dungeon. So
okay, you don't have to brag.
Get in the loot.
Come on. He probably depleted.
Oh, he definitely did.
I am a depleter of medium keys. Yes,
to low,
medium to low level keys. Sorry.
But yeah, on that end, you know, it seemed like they. Even with the Void-touched Emissary coming into play, there wasn't a lot of time spent towards skipping, and Zyro, I remember you pointed out during the cast of, they didn't really have anything to pull Jes Howlis through the wall in that end, and they just ran around, did everything, and it cost them a massive amount of time for some of those pulls.
But it cost them a lot of time, but at the same time, since they weren't planning to do any of those major cannon pulls, they would have just pulled something else in place, or they might have pulled that the entire floor instead. It's just like, this is the kind of strategy you see from a team that's not necessarily prepared to run this dungeon, and it looks like neither of these teams necessarily were. I mean, Big Money Crab, it feels like they've done that for the entire tournament. They've just played like these safe strategies the entire time.
As a good point of reference, just like teams will generally walk up to that top area with the cannon at like a worst case scenario, like 24% count. That is like the minimum that you can have, and then you get all of your count from the top area. Big Money Crab, I think, had like 76 or something, like something ridiculous. So that's just like a point of reference of how much over count they actually were. They didn't even use their cannon that was after Sky Captain Valeri. Overall, it felt like they were just doing it like a live key. They pulled some like weird thug packs. They pulled that weird pack as well with all the C speakers and everything that's also with the jailer and everything that is in the hallway area. So overall, I think we're spot on by just saying that it felt very much like a live key. Like 27 minutes for Tol Dagor, whenever the best run that we've ever seen is like 13 minutes. Yeah, so
it's rough times.
It's rough times, yeah.
Well, I think the most important thing was how well are these teams looking at other people's strategies, because when you have fortified, skittish Grievous onto that end, you're not really having any wild things coming at you. And in many cases, Nagura, you can just kind of look at how other people are setting up their strategies, or even looking at, running with like the mage or something along those lines, or having a druid for mass entangle, just to be able to grab all those mobs in together and then start nuking it with the cannon. But
yeah,
it didn't seem like they really took those strategies from the West.
No, definitely not. I mean, I think some of the affix, Grievous definitely is causing some problems for the first boss. I think Sand Queen can actually cause some problems because of the Grievous, because of the Skittish. But outside of the first boss, none of the other bosses should be causing any problems. And the trash shouldn't be causing any problems either, because if you deal with most of the trash in a cannon area, then Grievous is not going to do anything because you don't get hit by anything, right? You just deal with it with the cannon part. But to be fair, this strategy in Tol Dagor that the Western teams have been pulling off, it's a strategy you have to practice a lot, I feel like. It's not something you can just look at and say, oh, let's just do the same, and then you try it once and it will work immediately. It's definitely a difficult thing. It looks easy when they pull it off, but it's definitely not. As soon as something goes wrong, if there's a Emissary of Tides that doesn't get succeed properly, as soon as anything goes wrong, you have huge problems and huge wipes. So maybe they just didn't have enough time to practice these kind of things and just decided to do it the normal live key way.
Yeah, and we even got to see firsthand how that first Void Emissary, right as they got onto the ramparts, was particularly effective, just crushing their group, and they had a number of deaths they shouldn't have if they'd been practicing a little bit more onto that. But let's see what Underrot is going to be bringing to these guys. We'll be taking a quick break before we do it. Don't go anywhere, guys. MDI coming up right after this. King of Ruin is tied up against Big Money Crab, as the Underrot is going to be our decider match to see who moves on to face up against Old and Scuffed. I'm not talking about Sloot, I'm talking about the team themselves. Hello everyone, I'm Jack, and joining me right now we've got Zyronic, Nagura, and Tettles. And Tettles, you were talking about it before during the break. Tyrannical, bursting, quaking Underrot.
I am worried about deaths on Cragmire with the trample from both of these teams. Obviously, the Holy Pally, we were talking about it. I didn't know if it was like well equipped to be able to deal with the trample. You told me that you thought it was actually pretty decent at dealing with it. Yeah. I think we may end up seeing some people ended up getting like gibbed by the quaking coming out with that trample combo, because that combo is pretty dirty.
Yeah, and it always depends on when that quaking is going to come out, because we've even seen previously with Resto Druids having deaths due to the quaking tyrannical combination in previous seasons. So they'll have to be very quick and careful onto this one, as game number 3 is getting started on the Underrot.
Yeah, and there we go. There's a Shadow Priest.
Ooh.
Interestingly enough.
Priest.
So, okay, Zyra, why did they switch to Shadow Priest in this dungeon over all the other dungeons?
Here's the thing. Shadow Priest is just a better Warlock right now, so that makes a lot of sense. I think the only benefit that Warlock brings over Shadow Priest for dungeons is like health stones and soul stone, and that's maybe some gateway skips, but there really aren't that many gateway skips in this dungeon that I can think of off the top of my head. I've put that on hold already, because King of Ruins is already having problems, and they've committed their Bloodlust to this pull. And this is the same story for every single dungeon we've had with King of Ruins and Big Money Crab so far. Big Money Crab, you know, little tortoise walking through the dungeon, doing slow pulls, going nice and safe, and King of Ruins is trying to do the MDI pulls, but they're just stacking up deaths right now.
Yeah, so this is causing so many problems for them. They already have 3 deaths here now. They just rolled the bursting too, and they might just go down and the quaking. Oof, Greeno barely staying alive, proccing the staff though, and Aaron also having some problems here as the last bursting stack procs. They should be fine now though, but yeah, having a lot of issues on this very first pull. Thankfully, they did manage to finish off the trash, because this would have cost them so much time if they had a full team wipe. So good on them to get that 11% trash, as they also committed the Bloodlust. Well, Big Money Crab is going slower, as we talked about multiple times, but definitely just, you know, being ahead at this point. They have 11% as well, but they don't have the 3 deaths on their board. So it's in Big Money Crab's favor so far. One thing to mention about they actually switched to the Resto Druid as well. So now they have a full Shadow Melt comp. They have 5 Shadow Melts. They definitely want to make use of this here, which is interesting to see, because most of the time, if any of the Western teams don't play Shadow Melt comps, it's usually Underrot, right? Because Underrot, there's not that many skips you want to do. Usually they just use Shrouds. So interesting to see that this is the dungeon where they want the Shadow Melt. We'll see what exactly they'll do. Well,
this is also a dungeon where we normally see teams run Horde for the
exactly.
Torrent, which you were just mentioning, but it's being a little more specific. But yeah, it just... Why would you run that in this dungeon when you could have run this in the Tol Dagor for all the skips that you could do there? It just doesn't make any sense, but I'm not going to try to make any sense of it. But yeah, we're going to see a Shroud coming out of them to skip past this trash pack, whereas we're going to see King of Ruins actually just trying to do the trash pack, and it looks like they're going to get through it just fine. They dealt with the most dangerous mob, which is that mask. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know what the name of it is because I don't really pull it either. So yeah, they deal with the trash pack just clean, but Big Money Crab is already on the boss, and this is kind of a different look. Normally we see them have more trash percentage when they get to the bosses, and King of Ruins is usually pulling off more skips, but teams are kind of swapping strategies early on in the dungeon here.
Yeah, and one thing to note is I'm pretty sure Shadow Priest can dispel disease. So that's something they have in favor later on. Usually we see the monks, either like Mistweaver monk or Windwalker monk, being pulled off to be able to dispel diseases in this dungeon specifically, just because the lashers, the stun that they cast, either needs to be healed away, it's an absorb that needs to be healed off to be able to get rid of the stun, or it can be dispelled as well. But Drastic Druids, unfortunately, unable to dispel diseases. So usually you have those monks that do it for them, or even paladins. But I'm pretty sure the priest can do it as well. So a little bit of a positive thing here as well to pick the Shadow Priest on their side. While King of Runes does not have anyone who can dispel those diseases, so they need to make sure that they interrupt all of them, which sometimes is not possible because there's Emissary of Tides in the Cragmire room, so they definitely want to make sure they watch out for that now. First boss here at Leaxa can be decently difficult on Tyrannical, just because you need to interrupt the boss and the mirror image as well at the same time, especially if you have a Shadow Priest that has a longer cooldown on that interrupt. It might cause some issues.
Yeah, it's funny because at some points I think the Blood Bolt from the effigy that spawns almost does more than the one from Elder Leaxa does, so you really have to make sure you're cleaving that down as quickly as possible. But they've got a, both teams have a pretty solid comp for doing that, and they both have plenty of melee interrupts to go around, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. And on top of that, they're also both running Prot Warrior, which can spell reflect any Blood Bolts that would go through anyways, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal for either of these teams, and that's why we saw both of them getting it down with close to no issues. King of Runes still has 30% left, but I don't really foresee them having any problems with just an interrupt rotation, hopefully, so shouldn't see any problems coming out from them. Now, the big time save in this dungeon that we see from a lot of teams in the western region is they're running that double Unholy DK comp, and they're pulling probably about 40% trash percentage in this dungeon and in their first pull with Bloodlust, but these teams aren't going to be able to do that. They just don't have the comp to pull that off. You have to have the Unholy DKs, so they're going to have to slowly creep through this section of the dungeon, carefully making sure they get every single interrupt, every single CC order, and it's just going to be a lot slower than we typically see from the faster strategies here.
Yeah, I actually wonder if the Western teams would still pull off these double DK struts with bursting. Because, I mean, they usually run the Mistweavers, right? And Mistweavers are really good at healing, at having this huge burst healing, but then they have to use the huge burst healing to make the pull happen, and then if they also have a lot of bursting afterwards, not sure if they could do it, but I definitely see a way for the Western teams to pull that off. So we'll see if we have Underrot with bursting in like a BlizzCon environment. We'll see if some of the teams still want to pull off these double DK strategies. It's going to be interesting to see. But none of that here for King of Ruins and Big Money Crab, as none of them want to run Unholy DKs. Not even sure if they can run it. I don't think we've seen any of them even play it so far. So definitely something that maybe they want to look at in the future, because DK is definitely on the rising. They're the new rogues, really. I mean, most of the teams have been picking up one or even two of them to be able to just ignore most of the trash mechanics, just nuking everything down so fast that you don't even have to deal with anything like that. And that makes it especially good for dungeons that have that are tides heavy, right? Because those Emissary of Tides, making it impossible to even CC or interrupt any of those abilities, like this Underrot here, where you want to interrupt all of those lashers and the frontals from the maggots, but with the tides, making it just so much harder, and that's why you see the root come out of Beradar here on the Emissary.
Yep, something we haven't talked about at all, and shame on us for doing so. With the priest in the group, every single member in the group has 3% more max HP, so that means they'll live through every single mechanic way easier. Unfortunately for King of Ruins, while they're slowly progressing through this trash, we saw LS actually go down to one of those fixates from the Feral Bloodstormers. Those just do so much damage. The biggest problem with those is those melees aren't just pure physical damage, they're shadow damage. So there's not that, I don't think Warrior really has, well, there's not a lot of classes that can deal with magic damage like that. You just have flat damage reduction. So it's really difficult to deal with. So we see him going down to it there. Honestly, not that surprising. It's one of the more higher damage dealing abilities in the game. But, excuse me, sorry. There is a skill cap to it. You can kite it around perfectly. If you actually just kite around about 10 yards away from the mob, it will slowly chase after you. Now, if you're in melee range, obviously you get meleeed, and if you run too far away, something like 20 yards away, it'll charge to you. So there's like a perfect kite range that you can do, but at the same time, you won't be able to DPS on any of these classes. So sometimes it's better to just take the damage to the face and hope that your healer can heal through it, but unfortunately, he ended up going down there.
Yeah, and then, I mean, if you kite it perfectly, then you also don't do any damage while you kite it, unless you're an Outlaw Rock and you have increased range. So that's definitely something that those teams only want to do for safety reasons. For healers, they sometimes kite it as well, but then again, if you're kiting it as a healer, you can't really cast anything, so that's also causing problems. Just these platformers in general. So this whole room in general has so many difficult mobs that they have to deal with, and we've barely even talked about these mobs in the past because of all of these DK strategies where they just nuke them down so fast that we don't even have time to talk about the mechanics, and then they're already on the boss. So with both King of Ruins and Big Money Crab going through this dungeon a little bit slower, we can actually see the mechanics that all of these mobs are doing and why they're so dangerous to deal with. You can see the Lashers constantly casting this ability that needs to be interrupted. If it's not interrupted, it will stun a random target that is not the tank, and it will leave an heal absorb behind. Now it's either healed away to be able to remove the stun, or it's dispelled as it is a disease. So most of the teams either want to interrupt it, or if they have an Emissary of Tides on top, they just want to dispel it, or some of them even ran human racials to be able to get rid of that with Every Man for Himself, I believe it's called. So something they don't have available in their group, though. None of those human racials in either comps. But we have the Dispel, of course, from Nilesy, from the Shadow Priest, so they have a little bit of a safety net in case something goes through. Now, Maggots, another mob here that also needs to be very carefully interrupted. The only way to interrupt the frontal Rotten Bow, as you can see being casted right now, is by stun, though. So that's the only safe way of interrupting. You can also knock it, but sometimes it will not really interrupt it and they continue casting it, so that's definitely a little bit scarier.
Yeah, definitely something interesting to look at. I mean, we haven't really talked about the Shadow Priest too much here, and I think it's something we want to look at because the damage is actually not that bad for them, right? He's doing a pretty significant amount of damage. The only major problem, as with any ranged DPS class, is that they have a very long duration kick, and the biggest problem with Shadow Priest is theirs is longer than almost anyone else's. Theirs is, I believe, 45-second cooldown silence, so they can really only help out every 45 seconds, where your melee interrupts are typically either 12 or 15 seconds. So their real only use right now is to be in the dungeon to do damage. They kind of suffer from the same problem Warlock has. That being said, I think they're a little better than Warlock in most situations. They do a little bit more even damage to everything, and on single target, they're not nearly as cooldown reliant as Warlock is. But you just saw it come out from Niles there, and I think we saw this the last time we saw a Shadow Priest as well back in Motherload, and I think it was also from Big Money Crab that we saw that. They're running Essence of the Focusing Iris, which is like, it's an AoE essence. We usually see essences that will buff both single target and AoE damage. Typically from most of our melee players, we see Blood of the Enemy, which is something that increases your damage to whoever gets hit by it. Essence of the Focusing Iris, it's not really a good single target ability. It gives haste for Shadow Priest, which is, generally pretty good, but the active is generally only used for AoE, so it's really interesting. It seems like it's more of a crutch essence choice than it's like a choice that's like, wow, this is the best case for every single scenario.
Yeah, very interesting choices here for Nilesy, as King of Ruins is already fighting Cragmire here. They finished the room, so they're in 61%, and they had their Bloodlust available, so they decided to pull the boss. While Big Money Crab just walked past the boss, probably because they want their Bloodlust for Cragmire as well, because it is a tyrannical environment, so Cragmire actually quite dangerous, and that's especially with Quaking on top as well. And this is why you actually see the worst combination of abilities here, unfortunately, for King of Ruins, as Quaking came at the same time as the boss was casting the Tantrum, and that's the worst case scenario you can have, the worst RNG that you can have on this boss. At least Greeno wasn't casting his Tranquility during that Tantrum, so he didn't have to interrupt that. He will save it for a later Tantrum later on. Now, usually Rastadroids are pretty good at dealing with the Tantrum in general, as long as you make sure that your defensives are being used properly. You also have the Tranquility to deal with it, and then you have personals for others, and you also have you just want to like have, for example, Barkskin on one Tantrum and then Trank on the other, then you can rotate Barkskin back, and then you also have the cloaks from the rogues coming in as well. So definitely some things you can use here, but Quaking can cause some issues as he's casting Trank right now. Hopefully he doesn't get a Quaking. Now Big Money Crab had some issues here as one of their members went down on one of, I believe that it was bursting that they had problems with, but yeah, they're just doing so much trash here, just waiting for the Bloodlust to come back up.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something really interesting here, because I remember Tettles was talking about this before the dungeon. Quaking on any boss where there's residual damage going out or major damage events going out is already incredibly dangerous. I mean, we saw what happened in King's Rest in the spring season when we gave a Quaking Tyrannical King's Rest to the Eastern region. That was, I mean, the first boss claimed almost as many lives on 1 week that we saw from any boss ever. Not to mention explosive Jes Howlis, but Quaking just makes difficult bosses that much more dangerous. It's a 25% health damage every 20 seconds that you have to deal with. You have to spread out. You have to deal with it. There's nothing you can do to dodge it. If you're below 25% health and that Quaking goes on you and you don't have a shield, we just saw LS almost go down to the Quaking right after the Rampage there. This is just so dangerous. But fortunately for King of Ruins, it looks like they're not going to be getting another Rampage off, and they're somehow going to be able to live through this boss. And at the same time, dude, Greeno's chilling. He's got 60% of a mana bar. He's been able to heal through this just fine. But it just goes to show just how dangerous this boss has to be. You have to be so aware of your positioning, where you're at in the group. There's just a lot that can go wrong. Yeah,
now Big Money Crab also engaging Cragmire as they have their Bloodlust now back up. So they are immediately using the Bloodlust and use all of their cooldowns to be able to burst Cragmire down as fast as possible. It's very important to just get a lot of damage on this boss just to reduce the amount of tantrums you're going to get. Because at some point you're just going to run out of defensive cooldowns, and then it's going to be so difficult for the rest to do it to heal the damage away, especially with this Quaking as we've been talking about. So we'll see how Biradar deals with the tantrum cast and how they use their defensives to be able to heal through it. Now, he actually does not have his Tranquility available yet, so they want to make sure they use some other defensives for the first couple of tantrums. As King of Ruins already moving on, they are definitely behind in trash by quite a bit, so that's something you want to keep in mind. King of Ruins, they're in theory ahead in raw dungeon speed, but because of the trash difference, it's pretty even still between those teams if you don't consider the 35 depth difference.
And you can see a little bit of Shadow Priest utility coming out here. The Vampiric Embrace was just popped at the start of that first tantrum there, so a little bit of extra healing coming out from the Shadow Priest there, helping out. And it looks like his staff also just now procced too, so he doesn't have that available for 10 more minutes, which is probably going to be the rest of the dungeon just about. So all of that utility is gone, but I mean, you can kind of see one of the strengths of Shadow Priest right now is just general damage. They're good at almost everything. As long as they can get their dots up and keep them up for a significant amount of time, they're going to be good at just about every single kind of trash pull you do. Now, they're not going to do that great of burst damage. They're not going to burst for as high as, a Mage will or, an Outlaw Rogue or a Windwalker, but in general, they're just going to be good. They're going to be okay to good on everything, and it just makes it a good safety pick. If that's what your main is, if that's something you're comfortable playing, I can see it being played in the MDI like this.
Yeah, and we also saw Nalsi right before they pulled Cragmire. They were pulling one of those Lasher packs, and you saw Nalsi just rotating his single target Dispel and his Master Spell to be able to get rid of those Lasher stuns. So definitely making use of all of that utility there. Now, unfortunately, the rest of it here for Big Money Crab was overlapping his own Bark Skin with a Tranquility because they had a pretty bad Quaking overlap. And his mana is also pretty low, so this might be causing some problems for them. He does have his Innovate available, so he can definitely go through one more tantrum. But if they get two more, then they might be having some issues, as King of Ruins is moving on, doing the trash in front of Sancha.
Yeah, I mean, that's something to look out for here. This is probably the last tantrum they're going to get. They just barely are able to live through it, so they just kind of get through it. As long as they don't get that fourth one, they should be just fine, so we'll have to keep an eye here if they're able to get through that. But King of Ruins is now catching up and also kind of they're going to end up passing up Big Money Crab here while they finish off the boss here. They've already finished this boss, of course. They're only 2% trash percentage behind, and once they deal with one of these mobs that they pulled here, they're going to be on the same trash percentage as Big Money Crab. So they've dealt with the trash in this dungeon quite a bit more efficiently than Big Money Crab has, and it makes sense. They've got just a slightly better comp for it. I think the melee DPS is better in general in this dungeon than a ranged DPS, just for the extra kick cooldown, because you can get more interrupts faster with that Fury Warrior with that Outlaw Rogue over the Shadow Priest. So there's just a lot more utility on the side of King of Ruins. And they're also going for like a similar MDI pull that we see from all the teams. Both Emissary of the Tides on top of Spore Color Zancha. And on this tyrannical setting, this is dangerous. Those Emissary of the Tides do a lot of damage to Prot Warriors.
Yeah, definitely want to be careful here, as the boss is also one of those bosses that does quite a bit of tank damage with this shockwave coming in, which you want to use to get rid of some of those mushrooms. It's a frontal cast. It does a lot of damage. And you see the Quaking as well. That's causing so many problems here for tank damage, tank incoming damage on top of just having all of these other. But now the Emissary of Tides actually going down. I believe they even focused them a little bit. They were not alive for that long at all, so maybe they were just playing it safe, making sure they focus them down before they go on the boss. And now, yeah, King of Ruins, they're 85% trash, so 2% ahead to Big Money Crab and already fighting Sancha, so they're definitely in the lead. As Big Money Crab did manage to finish off Cragmire before the last tantrum came out there, they're dealing with those two defilers and just constantly rooting the Emissary of Tides in the back. Now, Emissary of Tides, they have a DR, so they have reduced cooldown on CC, so the root only lasts for 8 seconds, but there's no DR. So you can just constantly reroute them. It will always last 8 seconds, and you can just keep it out of keep it rooted forever, basically. So that's why Wrestler Druids are pretty good at keeping Emissary of Tides out.
Yep, at the same time, I mean, it's something, well, I'm kind of confused by what Big Money Crab is doing. They're not opting, well, never mind, I'm not confused at all. This is what they've been doing the entire tournament. They're going for the safer strategy of not cleaving anything down. So they're not going to make, they're not taking any chances at all. And honestly, I think the only way we're going to see them win this dungeon is if King of Ruin has any more deaths. They already have 7 more deaths on the board, so which that's 35 seconds on the clock, but they're halfway through this tyrannical boss that Big Money Crab has yet to even pull. They're just now pulling it. So I think where they are on the boss is definitely ahead of those 35 seconds that they have on the board. They do have 4% trash that they have to deal with, but it almost looks like Big Money Crab is over trash percentage because they already get 6% from the stuff that's right in front of the Unbound Abominations room. And, well, they are running a full Shadow Mode comp, so they technically could run through the entire room here just to get to that trash pack and pull the perfect amount of trash. But we haven't seen them do any major skip like that in this entire tournament ever, so ooh, a little bit of a scary moment from Big Money Crab there too, as Niles gets hit by a whole bunch of stuff while getting knocked up as well. So, and just barely lives through it, but kind of a scary moment for there.
Yeah, at least he was able to dispel himself right as he got hit by one of those orbs that do apply a disease debuff, just like the mushrooms do. It's the same debuff, so almost all of the mechanics here from Sancha apply it, and it also stacks. It's a damage over time effect that is dispellable, but not by the rest of it, only by Niles, the Under Shadow Priest here. So as he dropped so low, getting hit by the upheaval plus the orb at the same time, he immediately dispelled himself, and then there was no more incoming damage, and he was safe at that point. But yeah, also making use of the dispel here too. You can see Niles just taking one mushroom once in a while, dispelling the debuff off of himself just to make sure that they're going to be getting rid of them when the boss casts the AoE, exploding the mushrooms if there's any up still at that point. You can see him running into those 2 mushrooms, dispelling it off immediately. Yeah, Niles really is that team player in Big Money Crab's group. It's not the healer in their team, it's really the Shadow Priest or Niles the Under Warlock before as well. King of Ruins now done with Sancha. They're moving on. They still need 15% trash, so they definitely have to pull some more before they go to this last gate area in front of the last boss.
Yeah, he's a team player, sure, but you know, it's something to be said, I guess. If it needs to be done to keep your team alive, sure, that makes sense. But if it's something that you're just doing to make everyone else's life easier, like it's a crutch for your team, I think it's something that you shouldn't have to be doing. Like it's obviously better to have your entire team execute better than have one person take the fall and take a hit to the DPS because other people don't want to do the mechanics properly. And also at the same time, he's also just getting hit by orbs on like every single one of these explosions. So it's not necessarily like the best mechanics, but I do like the intention, I guess.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, maybe it's a high key mentality to have, right? Maybe they're used to running high keys on live servers, and that's something you would do then, right? You want to play maximum survivability because you're not trying to do the key as fast as possible. You just want to make sure that you do the key in time, right? So using all of your utility to the maximum effect and making sure you play as safe as possible is really a strategy to play for live keys. Well, that's not really a mentality you should be having for the MDI, but that's something that is hard to change if you're used to it so much and if you're used to playing live key. So that's definitely something you want to keep in mind. As King of Ruins, they are fighting those last 2 mobs, corruptors in front of the gate. They also have the Emissary of Tides here. They're slightly over percentage, just slightly though. It's like a 0.5% or 1% that they're killing too much here with the Emissary of Tides. Again though, you have to keep in mind that King of Ruins has 8 deaths, so it's a 35 seconds difference.
Oh no!
Now, unfortunately, no, I was speaking too early. Big Money Crab now having 5 deaths, unfortunately, as they go down with this danger noodle here in the Defiler. I'm not really sure what happened. Did the interrupt not go off?
Oh, I know what happened. You caster cursed them. It was you this time. It wasn't me.
It wasn't me, no.
But here's the thing. They do have. Oh, are we gonna? Is this gonna be the first time in MDI tournament play forever that we get to see the shortcut skip in Underrot? Come on, Baradar.
Oh.
Show it to us. Go left here. Take a left. Come on. Oh yeah, there it is. We get to see the skip here. Of course, this is a path that opens up if you're ever doing Underrot on live. This path opens up whenever you kill Spore Color Xancha. So we do get to see him get back a little bit quicker to get this mass res off. But it looks like it's going to be a little too late for them, unfortunately, because they did have that kind of advantage where they had 7 less deaths, but wiping to that tiny little trash pool there. This strategy that they have, where they go for the smaller pulls, it only works out if you're completely safe for them. And King of Ruins, even though they've had 8 deaths, the speed at which they've been going through the dungeon, it just lends a much bigger advantage to them. Like, they've just been going so much faster throughout the dungeon. They've been more or less cleaner with their pulls, outside of one wipe at the start of the dungeon, and they've got the Bloodlust for Unbound Abomination. Now, Unbound Abomination on Tyrannical with Quaking, if you're not perfect with your debuff management, if you don't get back inside that circle of light every single time to remove your debuffs, I could see a world in which you wipe to this boss. But it's just, once again, it's all about positioning. As long as you're positioning those frontal abilities in the right spot, you don't let those Rotting Spores get into the group, this boss should go down, no problem. First set of Visages coming out for them right now.
Also, advantage here for Shadow Priest. They're able to Master Spell all of the debuffs off of the group in case you miss one of those light circles. But again, it's really just it's something you don't need. It's just nice to have in case something goes wrong, to be, to be able to save your group in case they messed up one of those circles. But you really should never mess up any of those circles. It could happen with Quaking, right? So when you have it at the very same time as the Quaking goes off, teams, they want to spread out, and then the circle doesn't hit everyone. That's, it can happen, but it's very unlikely, as King of Ruins is still fighting Unbound Abomination, and unfortunately Big Money Crab going over percentage there, and 100% at this point, and they still need to kill 2 Corruptors plus an Emissary of Tide, so they're definitely going quite a bit over percentage, unfortunately. There was a chance for them to get back into this dungeon because of the death difference that King of Ruins had, but at this point there's no way they can catch up unless King of Ruins does have a wipe here on that last boss. And they're already on the second set of Blood Visages here, so once the energy bar goes to 100, goes to full one more time, they're gonna get the last 2 set of Blood Visages, and then they're gonna be done.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say something that might sound stupid, but doesn't Master Spell only remove 1 stack of the debuff as well? Like, isn't it? It removes all of it. Okay, maybe that's something with Warlock Amp Dispels being weird, because whenever I try to dispel myself, it only removes 1 stack, and it seems silly to do, so I just go stand in the circle most of the time. Or I don't, because I'm a Warlock and don't care about healers. So that's interesting as well, but at the same time, you shouldn't really need the dispels as long as you're standing in the circles every single time they come out. Like you mentioned, the only time it should ever be a problem if there's Quaking at the exact time it goes off. Obviously, you can spread out while it's out, because it takes about 5 or 6 seconds for it to go off and dispel the entire group. But perfect execution on Unbound Abomination for King of Ruins. After their slight hiccup against Buff or Nerf early in the tournament, we were kind of all questioning whether or not they could pull this off, but once these 2 Blood Visages go down, they're going to be taking this series 2-1 against, I think, a fan favorite in Big Money Crab, and moving further on in the tournament. Yeah,
Big Money Crab is going to be gone, unfortunately. We're sad to see them go.
Big Money Crab getting eliminated by King of Ruins. We're very sad to say goodbye to Big Papa onto that one. I'm sure they are steamed. King of Ruins bringing down the hammer, cracking that shell, taking the win on Underrot, despite the number of deaths.
Yeah, insert Crab Rave music here. Big Money Crab getting out of the tournament. I mean, overall, it felt like it was very competitive for what it was worth. Neither of the teams were pulling in a way that would be conducive to even warrant double Unholy Death Knight. We've seen that as the most popular strategy for this instance. However, with the way that both of these teams were playing, it was more like a slow and steady wins the race. The least amount of mistakes will end up allowing you to win. King of Ruins ends up starting off the dungeon a little bit slow. They try to get a little bit more count. They end up pulling this mask mob, which you have to end up kicking the cast of that, otherwise it'll wipe your whole entire group. So they do a really good job of getting a decent amount of their count towards the very beginning. But after that, it looked like Big Money Crab had a slight advantage, just utilizing that Shadow Priest, utilizing that Vampiric Embrace. But then Big Money Crab, not even just their wipe, they also had a big issue where they backtracked 25 or 35 seconds to get back to Cragmire just to make sure that they had their Bloodlust available, which whenever you're in a speedrun situation, I feel like you just have to man up and pull Cragmire without Bloodlust available to you. But overall, we did see King of Ruins taking that 2-1.
That's right, and they will move on into the lower semis to face off against Old and Scuffed. And the winner onto that one will be playing in the lower finals. So we also have Buff War and Black Mamba sitting pretty in the upper finals. And we know from previous matchups as well, Buff War Nerf Rogue looks quite tough to beat in this tournament. And especially on this one's ironic because Black Mamba's had a lot of struggles.
Yeah, Black Mamba, we talked about this. Black Mamba, similar to Big Money Crab, because we've been talking about this a lot this past match. Their whole strategy is to hope that the other team makes mistakes. And Buff or Nerf Rogue, even if they make mistakes against Black Mamba, I think they're still going to win because they're just so much better in their overall execution and speed throughout the dungeon. I don't think Black Mamba even stands a chance against them.
Really?
Nope.
Ooh.
It's going to be 2-0 Buff or Nerf Rogue. It's not even going to be close.
You would not put a big money crab on them.
I would.
No.
But what if Buffborn Rogue plays Moonkin?
They'll still win.
Interesting.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
what if they play 2 Moonkins?
They'll still play whatever comp they wanted to, and they'd win this. Come on, like
it's just it's very strange because Black Mamba actually posts fairly competitive times on their time trial, even competitive with some of the top teams in the world. But then for some reason, like whenever push comes to shove with execution in like the actual matches, it feels like they just like flop. Like I don't understand. Like maybe they just don't have enough time to practice their strategy. Maybe they're only really practiced on those 3 time trial maps. But I expect to see more out of Black Mamba than what we've seen all season long, unfortunately.